The moment my mother-in-law told me to hand over the house keys or find somewhere else to sleep, I realized she had never once considered that I might actually leave. She had said it in front of everyone. My husband's entire family crowded around the dining table at Thanksgiving. Turkey still warm on the platter, my sister-in-law's kids running circles in the hallway, and my mother-in-law seated at the head of the table like she always was, looking at me like I was an inconvenience she had tolerated long enough. She didn't expect silence. She expected me to fold, the way I always had before. What she didn't know was that by the time those words left her mouth, I had already spoken to a real estate lawyer, opened a separate bank account, and quietly accepted a job offer in Calgary that I hadn't told a single person about. My name is Meredith. I was 37 years old when my mother-in-law handed me what she thought was a punishment. I'm the kind of person who takes a long time to reach a breaking point, but once I get there, I don't turn back. It took me 8 years of marriage to understand that some people will never respect you until the moment you stop needing them. I married my husband, who I'll call my husband throughout this, because, honestly, he doesn't deserve a name right now, in the summer of 2016. We were both from the same mid-sized city in Ontario. We had met through mutual friends at a backyard gathering, the kind where someone's always burning the burgers and someone else is always telling a story that goes nowhere. He was funny. He was warm. He had this way of listening that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. What I didn't fully understand then was that he saved all that warmth for company. At home, especially around his family, he became someone else entirely. His mother was the kind of woman who collected grievances the way other people collect recipes. She remembered every slight, every missed call, every holiday where someone brought the wrong dish. She had 3 adult children and strong opinions about every single decision any of them had ever made. My husband was the eldest, and she had always treated his life as an extension of hers. When we got married, I tried very hard to build something with her. I drove out to her house in Mississauga at least once a month during those first 2 years. I called on her birthday, Mother's Day, and random Tuesdays just to check in. I asked for her recipes. I complimented her garden. I genuinely tried. She tolerated me in the way someone tolerates a piece of furniture that doesn't quite match the rest of the room. Polite enough, but always slightly off. The criticisms came slowly at first. A comment about how I seasoned the potatoes. A raised eyebrow when I mentioned I was keeping my last name professionally. A long pause after I told her we weren't planning to have children right away. She never said anything cruel outright. Not in those early years. It was always wrapped in something softer. I'm just asking. I'm only saying. Don't you think it would be better if? My husband's response was always the same. That's just how she is. She doesn't mean anything by it. I stopped counting the number of times I heard that sentence somewhere around year 4. My sister-in-law was a different kind of problem. She and I had never truly connected, mostly because she had decided, before I even walked through the door, that I wasn't right for her brother. She didn't dislike me, exactly. It was more that she seemed to view me as someone permanently auditioning for a role I would never quite get cast in. She'd make comments in passing. Never anything you could really call out, just little things. A raised eyebrow about my cooking. A quiet laugh when I mispronounced the name of a wine at dinner. A text to my husband that I accidentally saw once, asking if I had always been this much. I asked my husband what she meant. He shrugged and said she was just being herself. After 8 years, I had spent so much energy managing their feelings that I had nearly forgotten I had my own. The job offer came first, actually. That part matters because it tells you something about the order things happened in, which wasn't the dramatic kind of sequence where one event causes the next. Life rarely works like that. Things were already shifting before Thanksgiving. I had been quietly restless for over a year, feeling something I couldn't quite name, but that sat in my chest like a low-grade hum. A friend of mine who had moved to Calgary 3 years earlier had been telling me for months that her company was expanding and that they needed someone with my background in project coordination. I had always said I'd think about it. Then one Wednesday in October, she sent me an email with a formal job description attached and the words, "I'm serious this time. Just call them." I called them. I interviewed over 2 weekends. I didn't tell my husband. I want to be honest about that part because it complicates things, and I think honesty matters here. I didn't tell him because I knew exactly what would happen if I did. His mother would find out within 48 hours, because he told her everything. And then there would be a conversation, the kind his family specialized in, where everyone would have an opinion, and none of those opinions would have anything to do with what I actually wanted. I had learned by then that the only way to make a real decision in that family was to make it completely alone. The offer came through on November 3rd. Senior project coordinator, hybrid schedule, starting salary that was 20% higher than what I was making. Relocation support included. I sat with it for 4 days before I accepted. I thought about what it would mean. I thought about Calgary, which I had visited once years earlier and remembered liking. All that sky and the mountains in the distance on clear days. I thought about what it would mean to start fresh somewhere that didn't have 10 years of accumulated judgment attached to every room. I accepted on a Sunday morning while my husband was out getting coffee. I sent the email, closed my laptop, and made eggs. Thanksgiving was 3 weeks later. The gathering was at my mother-in-law's house, the same bungalow in Mississauga she had lived in for 30 years. My husband's sister was there with her 2 kids and her husband. His younger brother had driven up from Hamilton. There were aunts and uncles and a cousin who I had only met twice. The house smelled like roasting turkey and the particular kind of tension that lives in families that have never learned to talk to each other directly. I had been quieter than usual that day. I was aware of it myself. I was thinking about the email, about Calgary, about how many dinners like this one I was going to have to sit through before I figured out how to tell my husband the truth. Part of me was relieved. Another part of me was already grieving something I hadn't lost yet. The argument didn't start over something big. That's the thing about these moments. They almost never do. It started because I mentioned, quietly, to no one in particular, that I had called my own mother that morning. She lived in New Brunswick. She had been having a hard fall, some health things that we were monitoring, nothing critical but enough to worry about. I had called her while my husband was in the shower, and it had been a good conversation, one of those calls, where you feel better after. I mentioned it at the table because someone asked how she was doing. My mother-in-law looked up from her plate. "You called her this morning, before we even got here?" I nodded. "She's been having a rough few weeks." There was a pause, the specific kind of pause that means something is coming. "It would be nice," my mother-in-law said, "if you put that much effort into this family." The table went quiet. My husband looked at his plate. I took a breath. "I do put effort into this family. I'm just saying." She set down her fork. "Your mother calls you every other day. You're always rushing off to talk to her. Meanwhile, we barely hear from you unless it's a scheduled occasion." "That's not really accurate," I said, keeping my voice even. "I call. I visit. I was here in September for your birthday." My sister-in-law made a sound, not quite a laugh, but close. "She's been saying this for years, Meredith. It might be worth just listening." I looked at her. "I am listening. I'm just also responding." That was apparently the wrong thing to say. My mother-in-law leaned back in her chair. "You know what your problem is? You've never really committed to this family. Not truly. You've always had one foot out the door." I sat with that for a second. 1 foot out the door. 8 years. 8 years of Christmases and Easter long weekends and summer barbecues and birthday dinners, and all those phone calls I made on random Tuesdays just to check in. 1 foot out the door. "I don't think that's fair," I said. "I'm not asking you what's fair. I'm telling you how it feels." And then my husband who had been sitting 3 feet away from me this entire time, turned and said, Meredith, maybe just let it go. Not mom, that's not fair. Not actually, Meredith does a lot for this family. Just let it go. Like I was the problem. Like my responding to something untrue was the thing disrupting dinner, not the thing that had been said to me. I set my own fork down. I'm not going to let it go, actually. The room shifted. I could feel it. My mother-in-law looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, with the calm of someone who had rehearsed this, "If you can't respect the way this family works, then maybe you need to decide if you actually want to be in it. And if you do, you can start by handing over the key to the cottage. Because, frankly, I don't think you've ever appreciated what we've given you." The cottage was a property the family owned up near Parry Sound. My husband and I had used it a handful of times over the years. My mother-in-law had given us a key shortly after we got married, a gesture I had understood at the time as welcoming. Now I understood it differently. I looked at her. Then I looked at my husband. He was staring at the table. I pulled the key from my coat pocket, because my coat was hanging on the back of my chair and the key was on my keyring. I set it on the table, very gently, beside the breadbasket. "Okay," I said. Everyone looked at the key, then at me. "I'll let you all enjoy the rest of dinner," I said. I got up, took my coat, and walked to the front door. I didn't slam it. I just closed it behind me, the way you close a door when you've made a decision you're at peace with. I sat in my car for about 15 minutes. The street was quiet. The maple tree in my mother-in-law's front yard had lost almost all its leaves, and they were piled along the curb in thick brown drifts. I watched a kid across the street ride a bicycle in slow circles on the driveway. I wasn't crying. That surprised me a little. I thought I would be. Instead, I felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Clear. My husband came out 12 minutes later. He knocked on my window. I rolled it down. "That was embarrassing," he said. "For who?" "For everyone. You just walked out. After your mother told me to hand over a key or decide if I wanted to be in the family." He exhaled. "She didn't mean it like that." I looked at him for a moment. 8 years of that sentence. That's just how she is. She didn't mean it like that. Let it go. "I'll see you at home," I said. I drove home. He arrived about an hour and a half later. We barely spoke that night. He slept on his side of the bed and I slept on mine. And in the morning he went to work and I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open and began making a list. The list was practical. Lease, utilities, moving costs, notice period at my current job. Timeline for telling HR. What to do with the furniture that was mine before the marriage. Storage options, postal address change. I wrote it all down in a Google Doc I titled November. I worked through it methodically, the way I had always approached projects at work, breaking each item into the smallest possible action step. I had been organized my entire adult life. What I hadn't fully realized until that moment was that it was possible to organize your way out of something, not just into it. Over the next 3 weeks, I did everything quietly. I told HR at my current job that I'd be giving 4 weeks' notice, starting the following Monday. My manager was surprised but professional. We worked out a transition plan. She said she was sorry to see me go. And I believed her. I found an apartment in Calgary through an online search, a 2-bedroom in a building near the river, with underground parking and a gym on the 3rd floor. I put down a deposit using money from my personal savings account, the one I had maintained separately throughout our marriage, not out of suspicion, but out of the same stubborn independence I'd always had. It turned out to be useful. I researched the legal side of things carefully. I called a family law clinic through the Law Societies of Ontario referral service to understand my rights and obligations. The situation was less complicated than I had feared. We didn't have children. This house was in both our names, but the mortgage was manageable, and I was prepared to negotiate fairly. I wasn't trying to take anything that wasn't mine. I just wanted to leave cleanly. My friend in Calgary helped me from her end, connecting me with a moving company that did interprovincial relocations, helping me understand the neighborhood, sending me photos of the river pathways at the end of October when the frost came in. She was the only person I told. During those 3 weeks, My husband behaved exactly as I expected. At first, he didn't bring up Thanksgiving at all. He came home, made dinner some nights, watched television, went to bed. We existed in the same apartment like two people waiting for the other one to say something first. Then his mother started calling. Every other day, sometimes more. He would take the calls in the kitchen while I was in the next room, and I could hear the low murmur of his voice without being able to make out the words. Once I heard him say, "She'll come around." I remember standing very still when I heard that. His sister sent me a message about a week in. It said, "I think you owe Mom an apology. She was just being honest." I read it and set my phone down. The second week, my husband tried a different approach. He started being attentive in the way he sometimes was early in our marriage, the way that used to work on me. He brought home butter tarts from the bakery I liked. He suggested we watch a movie together on a Friday night. He asked about my week with what felt like genuine interest. I participated in all of it. I was warm. I was present. I wasn't performing exactly. I think I genuinely still cared about him as a person. But I also knew what I was doing and why. It felt like being two things at once in a way I didn't have a good word for. The week before I left, he came home with Thai food from the place on Queen Street that we ordered from whenever we were trying to smooth something over. He set it on the table, got out the plates, and said, "I think we've let this go on long enough." I sat down. "I agree." He looked relieved. "Good. Because honestly, Mir, I think if you just had a conversation with my mom, cleared the air." "I'm moving to Calgary," I said. The room was very quiet. He set down his fork. "What?" "I've accepted a job offer. I've already given notice at work. I have an apartment. I leave in 10 days. He stared at me. "You're what? When did you?" "I've been planning it for a few weeks. The job offer came before Thanksgiving, actually. That's part of why I've been quieter lately." "You didn't tell me." "No, why?" I thought about how to answer that honestly. Because I needed to make this decision without the noise, and I think you know what I mean by that. He was silent for a long time. Then he said, "Is this about my mother?" "It's about a lot of things. Your mother is part of it. But it's also about the fact that I've been slowly disappearing in this marriage for years, and I think you've watched it happen and not said anything, and I don't know how to come back from that." He looked like I had said something in a language he didn't quite speak. "You could have talked to me," he said. "I tried. For years, I tried." The conversation that followed was the most honest one we had had in a long time. It was also painful in the way that honest conversations often are. Not because anyone was cruel, but because the truth, when you finally say it out loud, has a weight to it that you can't unfeel. He said things I think he meant. He said he hadn't realized. He said he was sorry. I believed some of it and reserved judgment on the rest. But it didn't change what I had decided. And I told him that, gently, clearly. The decision wasn't a reaction to him. It was a response to 8 years of evidence that I had gathered slowly, the way you gather anything slowly, without realizing you're doing it. The morning I left, I called a moving company that had already come to pick up the things I'd arranged to ship. Mostly books, some kitchenware, the items that were clearly mine. The rest we'd figure out in time. My husband was at work. We had said what needed to be said the night before. Parting with him that morning was quiet and strange, like closing a chapter in a book. You've read so many times you know every word, but still feel something when you reach the end. I had left a letter on the kitchen counter. Not for him. He already knew. For his mother. I had written it 3 times before I was satisfied with it. It wasn't cruel, and it wasn't dramatic. It was honest in the specific way that I had spent years not allowing myself to be. I told her that I had valued the chance to be part of her family. I told her that I had tried. I told her that I had also spent 8 years absorbing criticism and minimization, and that at some point, the weight of that becomes something a person has to set down. I told her I hoped she understood, and that if she didn't, I hoped she would someday. I don't know if she read it. I don't know how she received it. I was already on the highway by the time my husband got home from work, and somewhere in northern Ontario, with Lake Superior appearing through the trees on my left, My phone started buzzing. I let it buzz. I stopped for the night in Thunder Bay. I sat in a diner and ordered pancakes and coffee, and looked out the window at the town, settling into evening, the lake somewhere in the dark beyond the buildings, and I thought about how strange it is to realize you are no longer afraid of something that controlled you for years. Calgary was cold when I arrived. The kind of cold that's sharp and clear. Nothing like the damp Ontario chill I was used to. The mountains were visible from certain streets, pale and enormous on the horizon, the kind of view that makes you feel very small in a way that is actually a relief. My friend met me at the apartment with a bottle of Pinot Noir and a box of pizza from a place she swore I would love. We sat on the floor because I hadn't bought furniture yet, and we talked until almost midnight. The first few months were not easy. I want to be clear about that. Starting over at 37, in a new city, in a job where you have to prove yourself again from scratch, is not a triumphant montage. There were evenings when I sat in my half-furnished apartment eating cereal for dinner, wondering what exactly I had thought I was doing. There were mornings when I woke up and reached for my phone to text my husband something mundane, a reflex from 8 years of shared life, and then remembered. There was grief in it, real grief. But underneath the grief was something else. Space. Room to breathe. The absence of a constant low-level vigilance I hadn't even fully recognized I was carrying until it was gone. I threw myself into the job. My team was good, genuinely collaborative in the way that some workplaces are and some only claim to be. My manager was direct and fair. I started running in the mornings along the river pathway, something I had tried half-heartedly in Toronto and never stuck with. And in Calgary, with the cold air and the light off the water, and the mountains catching the sunrise from across the valley, I found that I actually wanted to do it. I called my mother more. She knew pieces of what had happened, not everything, but enough. She was careful with her words in the way that parents sometimes are when they sense their child is fragile in a specific new way. She said once, "You sound different. You sound like yourself." I think about that a lot. My husband and I talked throughout those months. Not constantly, but regularly. The conversations were different than anything we had managed while we were in the same house. Distance has a way of removing the static, of making people speak more carefully and listen more actually. He told me things I hadn't known, or hadn't let myself know. He said he had started seeing a therapist in January. He said the therapist had helped him see patterns in how he related to his families, specifically to his mother. Patterns that had been running so long, he had never questioned them. He said the word enmeshed in one of our calls, and I had to stop myself from laughing, not cruelly, but because it was such a clinical word for something I had lived with for 8 years without ever hearing it named. His mother called me in February. I almost didn't pick up. I sat and looked at my phone for 4 rings and then answered. She was different on that call. Still herself, but quieter. She said she had read the letter. She said she had thought about it for a long time. She said, and I believe these were her actual words because I wrote them down afterward. I don't think I understood what I was doing. I don't think I realized. She didn't say she was sorry, not exactly, not in those words. But she said enough that I understood she meant something by it. It wasn't the apology I had imagined receiving for years. It was smaller and more real, which is actually what apologies usually are when they're genuine. His sister called in April. That conversation was harder. She was less willing to look at herself, more inclined to reframe things as mutual misunderstanding. But she called, which was something, and she said she hoped things worked out, and I said, I hoped so too, and we left it there. By the time the first year in Calgary had passed, I had a life that felt built rather than inherited. A circle of friends who were mine and not ours. A neighborhood I knew, the good coffee shop, 2 blocks north, the bookstore on the corner, with the owner who remembered what you'd bought last time, the running group that met at the pathway entrance on Saturday mornings. An understanding of what I needed, and a slightly better ability to ask for it. My relationship with my husband is something I am still figuring out how to describe. We are not divorced. We are not together in the way we were. We talk. We have visited each other. Him to Calgary once, me back to Ontario once. Careful visits that felt like archaeology, like two people examining the same site from different angles. There is care there. There might be a future, a different one than the one I had imagined. Or there might not be. I hold it loosely now, which is something I didn't know how to do before. What I know is this. The night my mother-in-law told me to hand over a key or decide if I wanted to be part of the family, she thought she was drawing a line. She thought I would stand on the other side of it and figure out how to get back across. She didn't understand that I had already been standing on my own side for years. She just couldn't see it from where she was. Handing over that key was the most honest thing I had done in 8 years of marriage. And driving away from that house in Mississauga, leaving the table and the turkey and the silence and all those years of folding myself into a shape that was never quite right, was not losing something. It was finally putting something down. Respect isn't a thing you earn by making yourself smaller. I know that now in a way that lives in my body, not just my head. And the version of me who used to apologize for taking up space would barely recognize the woman writing this. I think that's the point.